Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Crystal Cavern. I'm your local crazy crystal lady, and I will be leading you through this journey. And I'm so excited to be fangirling over some crystals with you guys. So to start out, I just want to say that this video will have multiple useful information for both people who just like to collect crystals, but also people who believe in the energy workings of it. We'll be going over some terminology and then some ways to work with them as well, and then we'll close with my own personal experience with them. So, I'm not a professional by any means. I literally am just a Wiccan who is obsessed with these stones. I've been on my spiritual path for 3 years now, so I'm definitely not like a seasoned practitioner. But crystals are generally my most important part of my practice, aside from my divinity. So, I first just want to explain a little bit about why crystals are so popular in the healing world. For people who might be a little skeptical, here's a good example. So, for example, amethyst and lepidolite, they have a lot of lithium in them, and they're known for being very helpful for anxiety and stress reducing. Well, lithium is also something that for a really long time they used in anxiety medication. So while you're not ingesting it, you're still absorbing it through your skin in very trace amounts. So that might help some people understand a little bit more about what the energy workings are, like why they are the way they are. So, and a good example of being drawn to the energy is when I was a kid, before I knew anything about this stuff. I was in a store and I just remember being so drawn to this one tumblestone. It wasn't my favorite color. It really didn't look pretty, but I just couldn't stop looking at it. I couldn't get my eyes off of it. I couldn't stop holding it. And I'm like, why am I like this? It doesn't do anything. It just sits there on shelf, right? And I really didn't understand it until I started coming into this stuff. I'm like, oh, that's what that is. So if you are drawn to something, don't overthink it. It might not be something that you walked into the store looking for, but just go with it and it'll tend to be what you need in that moment. Like if you look up what it's meant to do after you buy it or after you've been drawn to it, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I love how precise and amazing that is. So firstly, we're going to talk about some terminology. Then we'll go into the workings of the crystals and my personal experience. So I also just want to put out there that this is my first time doing anything like this. So if the audio quality is a little lower, I do apologize. Bear with me. And let's get into it because there's a lot of terminology that we are going to be covering. So the first thing that we are going to talk about in terminology is a pegmatite. So a pegmatite is a stone that's made up of a bunch of other different stones. So for example, I have unakite and a latstone. So unakite is primarily made of pink orthoclase, feldspar, and green epidote, whereas the latstone is an entire list of different crystals like malachite, azurite, chrysocolla, turquoise, and the list goes on. So the next one is finishes. So for fire quartz here we have polished. So a polished stone is generally glossy, they're generally cut or rounded to a more quote-unquote pleasing shape. We have semi-polished as well. So a semi-polished, they tend to have a bit more of the host rock displayed in it and tend to be called more of a specimen, if you will. And then the last one here for finishes is raw. So with the raw crystals, they're not really cut, they're not really, glossy, anything like that. It's pretty much just how you get it from the wall, just, maybe cleaned up from some iron oxides that were on it or something of that nature. And the next one would be a scepter. So scepters are generally characterized by having a thicker point on the tip and then having a channel of thinner crystal following it. You'll find them very commonly in the quartz family. We also have geodes. Now, geodes are basically any spherical or 3D ball-looking rock that has crystals inside of it. This one particularly is banded agate with some druzy inclusions inside, so that adds a nice touch. And then we have clusters. So you can find clusters in so many varieties of color, shape, crystal, size, directions. it's really amazing what the natural earth can provide for us. And this one that I've used here is celestial quartz, which is actually smoky quartz. Celestial is just the type of formation that this is, the type of cluster. So then next we have record keepers. So record keepers are basically densely populated either triangles or rectangles, things that are overlapping each other on the crystal surface, and this is naturally forming. I have a piece of fluorite that has this, and it's so nice. I will show that to you again in my fluorite video, which I am very excited for. Now the next is druzy. So druzy is basically a type of crystal cluster, but it's so small that it basically just adds a whole bunch of little sparkles to a piece. This one here is spirit quartz, which is very popular, but actually is a little bit more on the rarer side of quartz. So next, and my favorite, is phantom. So a phantom is basically a historic timeline of that crystal's life. If you look in the center here, you can see different points. Now the one on the bottom, that's the first crystal that grew. And then the second one is a crystal that grew on top of that, and a crystal that grew on top of that, and on top of that. So you can really see the progression of the crystal through its lifetime. And next we have the matrix. So the matrix is the host rock that a crystal is displayed on. So you can find that being like very hard, stone-like, such as in the case with topaz, or you can find that being very muddy, such as in the case with things like amethyst. This here is vandonite, which definitely is in my bucket list of getting a piece, but it is very expensive. A piece like that would probably go for 20 to 50 bucks. And so next we have anhydro. So an anhydro is basically a captured bubble of water inside the crystal. So if you were to tilt that crystal side to side, you would see that bubble moving inside the yellow bit when you tilt it. It's such a cool, interesting find that's naturally forming. So when it comes to finding things in the market, I would say that the spheres, carvings, and towers are the most popular shapes that you can find. Spheres you can get in all different sizes, all different crystals, all different forms. Like you can get some that have pockets in them, like holes. Like I have a sphalerite fluorite sphere that has a whole bunch of druzy holes in it, which is really, really nice. Carvings you can get in literally anything. Like anything from the cutest little dogs to like human body parts. Like you can literally find carvings in so many different things. And then we have towers. So towers are also very popular. You can find them, most of the time they're hexagonal. Sometimes you can find them more in like an obelisk shape, which is like four-sided. Yeah, so that is... So the next one that we have is called a root. So roots are generally a point that is tapered down on the other end. Generally, you can find them naturally forming as well as just being like a break off of a bigger cluster. And then we have the freeforms. So freeforms are basically just any shape that the crystal comes in. It's not cut generally. Most of the time they're polished, but not always. And then the next one we have is a pendulum. Now you can make a pendulum out of pretty well anything that you want it to be. This one specifically is bloodstone. And basically you would just talk to the divine or to spirit, any sort of being on another plane, and just ask it yes or no questions, and they'll swing the chain yes or no. And after that, we have the egg, double terminated, and the flame. So obviously an egg looks like an egg. They're not formed like that naturally. They are cut to be that way. So for double terminated, now generally in the market you will find them being cut, and that's what I've displayed here with tiger's eye. So with the cut version, it's a lot more precise of a point, whereas the naturally double terminated ones tend to be more like a trapezoid in their point because it is formed naturally. And you will hear them being described as a DT for short form. And then for a flame, it's really just any pointed cut shape. Like you can find them in spirals. Like I have a selenite that's a spiral. This one here reminds me of a Christmas tree. And yeah, so that is it for terminology. Okay, so now that we got the terminology out of the way, we can get into different ways we can work with them. So I'm going to be talking about crystal gridding, I'm going to be talking about meditation, and just carrying them around with you. So first up is gridding. So for crystal gridding, it's basically combining sacred geometry and crystals in order to amplify and manifest any kind of changes that you want to occur, any kind of changes for the better that you're wishing to implement in your life. You can use it for healing, you can use it for, hope, really anything, as long as you're not messing with free will. That's the most important part. So the ones I have displayed here are some that I have put together. So this middle one here is about abundance. This plate that I've done on wood, I'm so happy with how it turned out. I stained it and then I painted the pentacle on it and everything. So yeah, it turned out really well and I'm super, super happy with it. The crystals that I've used in the two on the outside would be selenite, smoky quartz, and clear quartz. And then the middle one is pyrite, heat-treated citrine, and clear quartz. And the one on the right is selenite, rose quartz, amethyst, and clear quartz. So sacred geometry is basically any kind of shape in a design that is symbolic to you. So for me, it was the pentacle. These are a few different options. These are ones that I actually have in my collection. The left and the right are ones that I got in a kit to start crystal gridding. This center one here is actually the crown chakra symbol that is etched into a piece of selenite, true selenite, I believe, instead of satin spar. So you can use crystals as your sacred geometry, you can use paper, you can use wood, you can honestly use anything that speaks to you. Now when it comes to the stones for gridding, you need two different types. You need a generator and then you need the surrounding stones. So the generator, try to find something that has a bit of a point to it, that way it can amplify the energy. Clear quartz is great as an amplifier of manifestation. The one that I have here on the second left is one that I bought at a local metaphysical shop. It is obsidian and smoky quartz. So you can see how the smoky quartz would fan out in order to connect to the rest of the surrounding stones. So using a stone that is symbolic of the intention you have behind it also helps. For example, obsidian is known for grounding and protection. So if it was a protection grid, I would definitely be using that centerpiece. Now your surrounding stones can really be anything that you have laying around. I personally find that they work better if they have a point to it, like these DTs that I have displayed on the right. But you can also just use tumble stones as well. It can be hard to find DTs sometimes. So yeah, that would be the stones. Meditation, there's a lot of reasons why people like to meditate with crystals. So firstly for me, it would be chakra aligning. I find that if I have, an imbalance somewhere along my emotional or energetic bodies, that, really sitting with the crystal and getting into that state really helps me to, one, ground myself and realize where I need to change my trajectory. But also it allows me to accept the knowledge and the wisdom that any of my spiritual team may bring to me in that state. So I do find that meditating with the divine is my favorite part. And of course, that is always aided with crystals. Everything's aided with crystals, in my opinion. But yeah, so it's really good for attunement, for healing, relaxation, shadow work, all kinds of good stuff like that. So what I do with crystals on the daily is carry them around with me, and that's how I became known as the crazy crystal lady, because I bring stones just as big as this to work every day, and there's 3 or 4 people at work that I do show on a daily basis who are also into crystals. But I just find that carrying them with you and, just having them in your aura does help subtly as well as overtly. I tend to just hold them and just zone out with them on the bus. And I find that that's when I'm able to work through a lot of my shadows and the messages that I get from the crystal and that the divine gives me through that state of altered consciousness. I I really do benefit from it, and that's when I find out whether I need, a lesson or whether I need, a blessing. Like, crystals are just such an integral part of my life now that I honestly couldn't live without them. And I totally realize that that's not the case for everybody, and it doesn't have to be. I'm totally okay if this is not your thing after all the stuff I've talked about. Everybody's different. This is just what matters to me, and for anybody else out there who thinks that they would benefit from it, I would love to share my information and experience with them. Um, it also just helps to have them around subtly, as I was saying. Like, I specifically remember I had one of my clear quartz on me the one day, and I just got so motivated, and I ended up like starting to put plans into actions that I'd been procrastinating about. So I didn't realize it was the crystal until like a day after, when I was carrying around my deep thought crystal on the bus and the divine told me that. So I just find it's such a blessing. The divine has truly spoken through Mother Earth, through the nature, and given us such amazing blessings. They're so beautiful, they're so helpful, and I'm just eternally grateful for that. So thank you for watching this. Thank you for coming on this journey with me and bearing with me through any technical difficulties that might be apparent. And I'm very excited to see where this will take me and where this coven will take us in the future. Have a good day, guys. Bye.